Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 334. My name is John O'Logan, and hey, anyone out there a baseball fan? We're recording this on October 29th, so by the time you listen to this episode, you will know the results of the fearsome clashes between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Los Angeles Dodgers after the Dodgers won Game 3, which was a game that lasted until the wee hours of the morning with 18 innings, lasting over 6 hours. Last night, the Blue Jays came roaring back to tie up the series 2-2. Last night in Game 4, and you might be wondering why I'm talking about baseball. Well, I am too. I have not been replaced by a pod person. I am not a baseball fan. I'm not really even a sports fan. I like bowling. However, I have to admit that I am very much getting sucked into the hype that is radiating from every single person in Canada right now. You walk down the street and every second conversation you hear is about the Blue Jays and their chance to win the World Series for the first time since their back-to-back wins in 92 and 93.
Since the Joe Carter days, yeah. I'm rooting for you guys because I like the Dodgers just fine, but man, they're just like all money. So go Jays.
Well, that answers my next question. Do we have any other bandwagon baseball fans on here today?
I mean, I'm not a bandwagon baseball fan.
No, it sounds like you actually know stuff.
Yeah, I played baseball in high school. I know a lot about baseball, but go Blue Jays. You know, it's awesome. Like I did not stay awake for that 18 inning game, but it's awesome that it just like that it's in like the cultural conversation in a way that baseball hasn't been in this country for a long time, and it's not like honestly like people here aren't like negative Canada, even though you guys are negative us as you should be. But just hearing people talk about baseball is fun to me.
Well, you I'm sure you enjoyed that, and hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of the episode, but there will be no more baseball talk. And Zach, do you like baseball?
I do not even know which teams we're playing. So
there we go. That's the energy I want to bring on this podcast about video games. I genuinely do not care about baseball, but as Zach suggested, I care about Canada a great deal, and boy, we need a win right now, and I'm not just talking about in sports. So yeah, it's the energy that's coming off people is excitement, but it's also kind of this vaguely unbalanced excitement. Like I feel like in 92 and 93 there was like excitement, like boy, the Jays might win, and now it's like the Jays might win, and it's a nervous energy. But you know who isn't needing a win? Folks who love video games, because they have been getting wins nonstop throughout September and October. My God, the last 2 months have been insane for just incredible video games coming out. So it's like Hades 2, Silksong, Silent Hill F, the remake of Tactics, Pokemon Legends ZA, many, many more. And we're going to be talking about 2 more games to add to the list of big titles that have been released. And we're going to start up now with some remakes, actually. And I mean, honestly, if you're listening to Random Encounter, you probably know which remakes we're going to be discussing today, which is Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake. So a little bit of background in case you don't know what Dragon Quest is. Again, it's Random Encounter. So the original Dragon Quest was first released in Japan in 1986. I would call it the blueprint for pretty much every turn-based RPG that ever came after it. It's very much like playing Final Fantasy, the original Final Fantasy. You can see like the direct connections to Dragon Quest. The game was first localized for North America in 1989, where it was renamed Dragon Warrior, which is I've always been weirded out by that particular localization choice. It's like
I think it was like it belonged to like a board game, I think at the time, or something really specific and weird.
Right, it's the reason why it's sort of the reason why the cartoon is called The Real Ghostbusters, because there was already a Ghostbusters. Anyway, Dragon Quest 2 was released in 1987, like immediately after, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the actual conversation. But Zach, as you say in the review, it was a big swing, not necessarily not necessarily the most successful big swing in the world, but a big swing.
Nope.
And a few years later, it was released, obviously, here as Dragon Warrior 2. But this was not the last time these games were actually released. There were some significant changes in the future. For example, the version of Dragon Quest 1 that was released in Japan and the version that was released here, there were some significant upgrades in the one that was released here. And then there were the versions that were released on the Super Famicom. And those versions eventually kind of were used as the basis to create versions that were released on the Game Boy Color, which I played. That was the first time I actually played through both games. I played both Dragon Warrior and Dragon Warrior 2 on the NES, but the first time I actually beat them was on the Game Boy Color versions. Since then, they have been pretty much constantly available. These are not games that are like difficult to find rarities, or you need to go online and dig around in the ROM bins to find a copy.
You could still get a copy of Dragon Warrior 1 for like $5 for the NES.
Yeah,
so,
pretty much. Yeah, like they're available on pretty much every platform you can think, including like iOS and Android, the Switch, PlayStation 4. So anyway, they're available in a variety of ways. However, this is the big one, because a few years ago when they announced the Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake, we were all asking ourselves, why 3? Why 3? Why are you not starting with 1 and 2? That seems like a weird choice. And weird choice aside, obviously, they were going to create HD 2D remakes for them, and they were later announced. So they incorporate the same HD 2D visual style as the Dragon Quest 3 remake, but they also add, I wouldn't just say quality of life improvements, but also some fairly significant changes. Like, these are not just remasters, these are remakes in terms of a lot of the game's mechanics as well, and story as well. And it's launching tomorrow for pretty much everything. And Zach, you've been playing it for the last few weeks, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
And I bet that made you very, very happy.
It sure did. Yeah, I mean, to talk from the top, I think it's important to note that, like, you know, Dragon Quest 3, the original, I think one of the reasons that you were talking about that Dragon Quest 3 was released first is, like, if you look at polls in Japan, which is where Dragon Quest is more popular, Dragon Quest 3 is generally regarded as one of like the 2 or 3 best Dragon Quest games.
It was a cultural landmark. That's where the myth that all schools are shut down on Dragon Quest release days came from.
They just released them on Saturday. But yeah, so Dragon Quest 3 is the first one to make sense, but also Dragon Quest 3 is really, in a lot of ways, the first like truly successful RPG of the series. I think that Dragon Quest 4 is great, 5, you know, on from there. And so the HD 2D remake of Dragon Quest 3, which I reviewed last year, is actually very, very similar to the original Dragon Quest 3. Like, sure, like it's definitely updated. You've got some additions to story, but for the most part, it's mostly about quality of life. It looks nicer. It plays cleaner, things like that. Dragon Quest 1 and 2 are both just hugely, fundamentally different games from the first, from the originals, and even from the iOS versions, which I wrote a piece about the Switch versions, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago. I don't think it's even on the site anymore because it didn't get imported. But the point is that, like, those, all the previous versions still basically were the original Dragon Quests, whereas here they're not. From a story perspective, I mean, it's just so hugely expanded. Dragon Quest 1 now takes probably, like, if you're playing quickly, I would say between 13 and 14 hours to complete. Whereas originally, I probably the last time I played Dragon Warrior 1, it took me maybe, I hate to say 6, 7, but it took me about 6 or 7 hours to complete it. And Dragon Warrior 2, I haven't completed in years. It's actually the very first RPG that I ever beat on my own mostly. I don't think I really did it on my own. My narrative tells me that I played it on my own, but there's just no way that game doesn't have any directions. There's no way. Anyway, it probably was like a 20-hour game. It's now a 40-hour game.
Okay. It's Dragon Warrior 2, Dragon Quest 2, and Final Fantasy 2 are both interesting, as it's like they were trying to figure out how to create follow-ups to the prototype of what would eventually become the series. So the second entries of both games are quite a bit different from all of the rest.
Yeah. Dragon Quest 2, I've said this on other podcasts before, was a game that I always thought the ambition outstripped the game design. They wanted to do something big. They wanted to do something unique and interesting. They wanted to experiment with the form, which is fascinating if you think about game design timelines nowadays, where it's like, you know, the last mainline Dragon Quest game that came out was like 8 years ago now. It's crazy. Whereas they're like, okay, we came up with this first one. Now we're going to add party members. Now we're going to add a real story. Now we're going to add a ship. Now we're going to add X, Y, Z, 7. It's crazy how much stuff they added to Dragon Warrior 2, but like in its original form, it was messy and difficult and very unbalanced. Apparently, Hori's come out and said that they didn't playtest Dragon Warrior 2 because they didn't have time. And oh boy, on the road to Rhone, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. You can tell it was brutal in the original version. Here, it's still hard, but it's not crazy.
Well, it's a very different game now.
Yeah.
My biggest takeaway from your review is actually that you had really cool grandparents.
Well, I mean, that's like the coolest thing about me still. They're not with us anymore, but they were excellent people. Yeah, I mean, I think I talked in the review about how the last time I actually saw my grandma, she was playing Dragon Warrior 1 and doing this weird RNG thing she didn't need to do with a chest in some dungeon. And it's the NES, so you had to like walk up and go hit reset on the NES every time you wanted to start again. She wasn't using a ROM, she wasn't using save state. She was playing OG Dragon Warrior 1. But yeah, I mean, they're games that they had like a particular rhythm and a particular flavor to them, and for good and ill, I think in these remakes and remasters, these two are dramatically different.
Well, let's talk about the first one first, which makes a certain amount of sense when you think about it. So the original Dragon Quest was, as I said, basically the prototype for everything that came after it. But it also did some things that were a little bit weird. Like, for example, there's no party. It's just a dude, one guy, and you'd only be able to fight one enemy at a time. And the world was, if I recall correctly, I mean, I imagine at 1986, this world probably felt like the most expansive, incredibly large open world ever. But like in retrospect, it's like, ooh, that's quaint. It just didn't really have a lot of complexity, I guess you could say, as we would judge complexity today. Back then, might have been a different story. So if you're going to remake it, how are you going to increase the complexity so it really does engage gameplay-wise with people who are coming to it for the first time?
I'm not sure that I know the answer to that question, because I don't think that the answer that they have here is the one that I would present if asked. I mean, so the additional story content is, there's a lot. There are additional towns, there are additional dungeons, there are, in both versions, a lot of additional bosses. One of the big changes, I mean, like, I think combat in a lot of ways, and I've seen a lot of reviewers talk about this, is probably the biggest shift. So instead of just having one enemy, you can have 5 enemies. Instead of having maybe like 6 skills, now you have like, I don't know how many skills, I didn't count, but it's got to be at least 30 that you have available to you. And so because they give you so many more tools, they then give the enemies a lot more tools. And that's sort of where some of the problems come in. So one of the things that you get access to is sigils, which are, if you've played Dragon Quest 2, you know that the whole sort of goal of that game is to gather the 5 sigils. They add into Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest 1 that you have to gather all 5 of them, along with like the Sunstone and the Rainbow Staff that you would have to do to get to the Dragon Lord's castle. But anyway, as you gather those sigils, they give you the ability to either like power up your moves if you're at low HP, or sometimes give you like sort of random crits, or they make some items more useful, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is that it introduces a lot of randomness, and randomness is really the key problem of the Dragon Quest 1 HD 2D remakes combat, because even in like random battles, you might be fighting like 5 enemies at once. And luckily they give you a boomerang, which lets you hit more than one of them at once. But the enemies might have between 1 to 3 turns. And if you're talking about 5 enemies, there is a huge difference between them hitting you 15 times or them hitting you 5 times. Now, usually it's going to sit somewhere between, 8 and 12, but sometimes it doesn't. And you just get wiped out by these enemies. Or in boss battles, like the boss might do like 4/5 of your health in a single hit every time. And you can just heal over and over again. But sometimes it might crit. Sometimes they might sit there and do nothing, or they might get 3 turns, or they might get 1 turn. It's all so random. And it's a way of trying to deal with, I think, the fact that it's only one party member. And it's funny because the NPCs around are like, are you sure you want to like go do that thing? Like, it's only you. Do you need a party? Are you good, dude? Are you sure about that? And you just keep going forward anyway. And maybe part of the point is that you get absolutely obliterated by RNG over and over again, because it's like you need a party, and that's a part of what Dragon Quest II is doing. But it's just like weirdly balanced. They tried. I guarantee there will be patches, maybe even a day one patch. Maybe by the time this is recorded or this goes up live, they'll have done some stuff about the difficulty in this game. But like, I played on normal, and I am good at Dragon Quest, and I struggled.
Basically, it sounds like they wanted to recreate that classic NES difficulty, just in a very different way.
Yeah, I mean, if it was classic NES, like I could just grind a level, but here grinding a level wasn't going to save me. It was about, I knew, I said this in my review, like I knew that if like the turns came out the right way, I'd be fine. But if they didn't, I would die immediately. Instant death spells everywhere. Like, how am I supposed to deal with that? It's just one dude.
It's just one guy. I'm actually really glad that they incorporated that into the meta narrative of the game.
Yeah,
that's a nice touch.
It was fun. Yeah, it was funny.
Yeah. So I would imagine that we'll get into Dragon Quest II in a minute. But from reading your review, I got the impression that while, I mean, the game is gorgeous, and it is absolutely a love letter in many ways to the original Dragon Quest, it also just kind of misses the point in some ways of the original Dragon Quest. Because I would say, and this mileage may vary, and obviously I have memories of playing it on the Game Boy and actually the NES. Dragon Quest is still a good game. Like, it is. Like, it's certainly not complex, but like I could genuinely sit down with a Game Boy and play Dragon Quest 1 and have a good time just for what it is. And it sounds like they expanded it in ways that didn't really make it better.
Yeah, I even outside of the combat, I mean, so I talked about the sigils already. That's like 5 additional required quests that you have to do. And it's like a lot of like, walk to that town, walk back to this town, walk to that town, walk to that dungeon, walk back to this town. And so it sometimes feels like busy work. Some of the additional storytelling is really cool. I can't go too far into it. Like some stuff with Princess Gwaelin, who is the princess who has been kidnapped. There's a lot of like cutscenes related to her kidnapping. She gets a lot of sort of time in the spotlight, which is all I'm allowed to say according to Square Enix. But she gets a lot of time in the spotlight, and that's cool. But it's even outside of the fact that, you know, they give you quest markers and they sort of tell you where to go, which is very not original Dragon Quest. I don't really have a problem with that. But what I have a problem with is that it says like, okay, go here, now go here, no go here, no go here, no go here. And whereas in Dragon Quest, all the versions of the original Dragon Quest, it was like, hey, you have these 2 general things you need to do and go do it. And, you know, in Dragon Quest 1, that works, I think, because, and it's very like sort of Western game design. It's very Ultima game design in that way, where it's a small enough space and it's a small enough world where it's not overwhelming. Like, you have to pay attention. You have to talk to people. You have to kind of figure it out. And there's a simplicity to it. Whereas here they want to give like the Dragon Lord some like motivations that they don't really explain until Dragon Quest II. They want to make you go to this town first, and you have to do that. And they'll literally block off this whole southern area with this forest that you can't get through until you've done like X, Y, and Z. And it's very on rails. It's a lot of like walking back and forth. It's a lot of like storytelling that I didn't think was very engaging and that felt like padding because they were trying to modernize it. But in that, they lose the flavor and the rhythm of it. And it's very possible that I just am attached to that rhythm. I like that rhythm. I want that rhythm. And this wasn't my rhythm. But if it added additional things that I thought were good, and some of them were, but most of them I thought were just like, meh, this is just like a waste of time. That's sort of where I fall on it.
So I wonder if they should have added a classic mode, like with tactics.
That would have been an interesting idea.
Yes, I would have enjoyed playing through it again in the original version.
Keep the graphics the same, but like, change it up, like single enemies, that kind of thing. Although I suspect that would cause some balancing issues, unless of course you just literally just use the original system, which I suppose you could.
Yeah, probably.
That's weird to me. Like, to me, Dragon Warrior 1, Dragon Quest, the magic, as I said earlier, it's not the biggest world in the world in retrospect, but back then it was massive. It was an open world game. And the fact that they're making it into a more linear experience seems to detract. Actually, you say it, detract from the simple magic of discovery.
Yeah, that's exactly how I put it, and that's how I feel. And it's weird that I say that because we're going to talk about Dragon Quest II, which is also a very open game, but like that game was so open that it was like it had no interest in respecting your time or your ability to move forward. And so I just think that Dragon Quest I was a small enough space that it worked, even with the janky localization back in 1989.
Yes, we Lodo aside.
Indeed.
Well, let's talk Dragon Quest II then, because unlike Dragon Quest I, Dragon Quest II is, again, a little bit like Final Fantasy II, a little bit of the black sheep of the family. They did do some things that were very logical. They created it. You now have a party. Instead of it being just a guy, you now have a party of folks who are going out and saving the world together. The world has expanded, obviously. And I have to say, it's just a tough game in many ways. And I don't necessarily mean tough in terms of the difficulty. I just mean it's, as you said earlier, it doesn't feel like a game that was completed as it should have been, even in its following iterations. But based on what I'm reading from your review, it sounds like they may have actually finished Dragon Quest II in a way.
No, Dragon Quest II is the new version of it is like a top 4 or 5 Dragon Quest to me. And getting into the top 3 is basically impossible. 8, 11, 5, those are Mount Rushmore games for me. But Dragon Quest II would approach those games. They even said in like the press notes they sent us when I got the review code, like this is the game that they transformed the most. And that is absolutely true. So, in the original Dragon Quest, you had 3 party members. Only one of them was worth anything, and that was the Prince of Middenhall, sort of the main character who you start out with. And everything else was just like, there are actually a lot of strategies in the original Dragon Warrior that were like, you should just let the other 2 die so he gets more experience, and who cares about them because they don't mean anything. And that was not only true from a gameplay perspective, which the balancing in that game was just horrendous, but it was also true from a storytelling perspective. But that is totally transformed here. Like, this is a story heavy Dragon Quest game now. There are lots of cutscenes. The characters are incredible. Like the Princess of Moonbrook, who you might remember you have to save. She's like transformed into a dog because her dad sent her off at the beginning of the game when her town is being attacked. She is probably the main character of the game now. She is like sort of the beating heart of it. Like, she's the one who had to deal with this tragedy of losing her kingdom, and her kind of dealing with her issues of revenge, and how is she going to handle that. Excellent. Prince of Canuck is just like a doofus, but he's like lovable. His sister joins your party a little bit later now as a 4th party member, which is a new addition. And she sort of is like a thief, almost like gadabout character. And it's just like a really complete party. And by the time you get to the end, you really feel like you've played a Dragon Quest. You've gone to these different towns and figured out their problems in a very Dragon Quest way. You have gotten enough direction. Even if you don't have the quest markers turned on, the NPCs are much more likely to give you directions that actually make sense. And, you're not going to get just like bodied when you like go 1 inch outside of where you're supposed to go. And so like they put you on rails enough, but there's still, at any given moment in the game, I might have like 6 quest markers like flashing at me. So I had a lot of different places I could go. And I think that there were definitely orders that I should do them in, but it still had that open feel to it, but with like a lot more direction, just really, really good storytelling. It's a totally different game. And sure, like the final boss, well, sort of is like the same. And like Hargon is still the bad guy. They do some interesting stuff with him. If you've played Dragon Quest 3, you know that they reference some of his motivations. And it's just, it's really good. And the combat balancing is excellent. It's just a really good game.
It's funny. I would have said the phrase Dragon Quest 2 has a great story would have been a great troll comment to put on the internet up until like now.
Yeah, it's the truth.
That's weird to hear. The idea that Dragon Quest 2 actually has an engaging story, because I mean, I like the Dragon Quest games. The initial one's not really known for their expansive and complex narratives.
No, I mean Dragon Quest 3 has like kind of an interesting narrative, but like it's sort of a gimmick.
Yeah.
And even the way it's presented in the HD 2D remake it is. But here, it's the same story, really, but the characterization is just like turned up to like 7,000 compared to 1 before. And I'm a person who values characters in a game, and it's just so different here.
See, I was looking at this, I was thinking, oh, those might be fun to play again. I had no idea that Dragon Quest II had gotten this expansive of a remake. I knew it was getting a remake, but I assumed it was going to be a little bit closer to the original than it sounds like it is, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah. No,
that's such a cool thing.
Both of them are just hugely expanded, but as we discussed, I think that the expansion of 1 wasn't necessary. Yeah. Whereas the expansion of 2, like I think I said this in my review, like it's a game that it wanted to give you like this huge canvas to work with and this huge space to work with, but like they didn't make me want to explore that space before. They didn't make me engaged in the stories of, Moonbrook, or, you go back to the original sort of island that Dragon Quest 1 takes place on, Tantagel, Rimualder, all these places. And now, because the writing and the characters are so compelling, that it feels like a whole space in the way that like a Dragon Quest 11 did. I know that sounds like hyperbolic, but like it really is working on almost that level.
It's fascinating. There's something I was thinking about recently with certain games, and that is, I wouldn't say they're unfinished, but there are certain games that genuinely have, I'm just going to say this, it's not exactly room. There's room for new things. If there's going to be a remake of it, there's room to add in new mechanics, new story, there's a place to add new. Whereas with Dragon Quest 1, I don't think there's a lot of room in that game for new or additional content, because it is very much, they kind of hit it out of the park with what they were going for off the bat. And everything after that was just quality of life refinements. Whereas with 2, it was in many ways unfinished. I didn't know about the QA testing, the balancing. They didn't have time to do it. I didn't know that. So it makes sense to me that the additions for Dragon Quest 2 would be way better than 1.
Yeah. I mean,
it just needs it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you play like the Switch version or iOS version of Dragon Quest 2, like they have some additions that they introduced in the Super Famicom or the GBC version. But it's still fundamentally Dragon Quest 2, like as you remember it. Whereas this is not. Like I haven't beaten Dragon Quest 2 since I was like 6-7 years old. I got to stop saying 6-7. The TikTok kids are going to love that too much. But
I don't even know what that means.
I'm so jealous of you, Jono. Just look it up. You'll see it.
Oh no, I've heard of it. I just don't know what it means.
It doesn't mean anything. That's the whole point. Anyway, the kid. I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, the point
the kids
is,
all right?
No, they're absolutely
no,
not.
They are not.
But I guess the point is that like it doesn't feel like it was like a game where they like kind of stuffed a bunch of stuff into it that didn't need to be there. It feels like this was the game they always wanted to make. Now, sure, like Yuji Horii, I'm sure he didn't have 80% of the additions in mind when they made this game, but I think the ambitions that they had are met by the additions that, I know Horii didn't actually really make Dragon Quest II HD2D remake, but the spirit of the game, and I think of what it wanted to do, is accomplished so beautifully. It's such a good game. Like I've nitpicks with it, but they're whatever. I don't care about them. It's just a great game now.
What I was just talking about with there being room for additional content, and when there's not, it just feels like you're crowding the room or you're taking away from the original experience. That's one of the main reasons that I have some trepidation about the idea of a Chrono Trigger HD 2D remake.
I'm against any Chrono Trigger remake. I just am. You don't need to remake that game. That game's perfect. Stop. Don't touch it.
Well,
just leave it.
That's the thing. Like the DS version, they added a couple of extra dungeons and they added the big final boss. And I remember playing it and being like, this is not even remotely as good as the actual game. Yeah. There was such a difference in quality between the additional content and the original game that I'm like, I would rather it not be here. And I'm a little bit nervous that they might take Chrono Trigger and like shove in more content, because that's what the fans, I've heard things online like, I want an explorable 1999. And I'm like, no, you don't want an explorable
That's
1999.
the whole point is that it's not explorable.
Like there's just it just like it worries me a little bit. Now I can see the idea of it getting a visual update. I don't think it needs one. I think the game is still friggin' gorgeous. But like I get that. But the idea that they're going to remake it or go in and change things or add new content or refine characterization, that makes me a little nervous.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. And it's funny because like I never really would have thought that much about Dragon Quest 1 and 2 on that front, right? You know what I mean? Like it's Chrono Trigger is maybe even to some degree like you could work it against it. Like it's a perfect game. Like I have no criticisms of Chrono Trigger. Whereas like Dragon Quest 1, like I still had criticisms of it, but like what you did to it was like not what I personally would have wanted. Whereas Dragon Quest 2, I never really thought like, oh, this is a game I do or don't want a remake of because I didn't care. And I think the fact that I don't care is part of why it's good. You know what I mean? Like it was like
it sounds like it was a big surprise.
I didn't care because it wasn't great. Yeah, I mean, when I got the review guide, and you know what review guides are like, John, like you get it, and they're like, that's like over 40 hours. I'm like, what are you talking about? This game's over 40 hours. And so I was like, I guess I better get started. And then I was like, oh, it's because you made it really freaking good. That's where all that additional time came from. So cool.
I mean, they could have made it. They could have gone the other direction and removed what little direction they were actually giving you to begin with, and that's why it's 40 hours now. 40
now
hours
none of the NPCs
around.
tell you anything, and we removed all quest markers. This is the true Dragon Quest II experience.
Well, Zach, I think my last question for you, and this is something that is I guess they're very, very different games, and they're very, very different styles of remake. But I guess my question is, would you say that Dragon Quest II HD 2D Remake is as expansive and transformational as, say, the Final Fantasy VII Remake?
No.
Okay.
It's still
Dragon Quest II.
It's still Dragon Quest II. I mean, like, it's. I would say that if you're using that as the benchmark, and like the change between like Final Fantasy VII and Remake is like, it takes it from a 0 to a 10. I'd say it's more like it would fall like to like a 3 or a 4. It's still significant, but it's not so fundamentally different that like they feel like totally different experiences that can't even be talked about in the same sort of conversation.
I think that Dragon Quest 1 aside, Square Enix has been doing some pretty good remakes of late. It gives me, again, do not want Chrono Trigger, but gives me hope that
great, you know,
Live
lots of good stuff. Yeah,
I mean, there are lots of games that are gorgeous on the Super Famicom that were never released in the West that aren't Saga games.
I hear Romancing Saga 2 is really good now too. So
I better see, it's so funny because that's one of the reasons I hate Saga games is that you're dropped into the world with given absolutely no direction. You're just like, here you go. Anyway, well, Zach, thank you very much for playing through this actually, I don't need to thank you. It's Dragon Quest.
I had a great time. Yes. Thanks for letting me do it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move on now to a game where, unfortunately, the person playing it did not have that amazing a time. Zach, you played The Outer Worlds 2, so I'm going to give a little bit of a background to The Outer Worlds, and then we'll dive into your review. So The Outer Worlds was announced, the first one was announced many, many years ago. I think it was 2018, kind of unexpectedly, and it featured the creators of the original Fallout series, and it was kind of positioned as a spiritual successor. And not just that, it was also positioned as a spiritual successor to Fallout New Vegas, considered to be generally the best Fallout game, because it was Obsidian. Obsidian made New Vegas. The game was not a AAA level production. People were calling it a AA level production at the time. And it was released, and it was well received. It did not set the world on fire, but it did a lot of things that I really, really liked. It created an interesting world. It had some interesting social commentary and satire, which is something that Fallout does extremely, extremely well. It featured, I thought, some pretty interesting societies that were based around corporate structures and ethos, and I really liked it. And a few years later, they announced that there was going to be a sequel to it. However, we were really hoping for an expansion of the game in many ways. We were literally hoping for, everyone's hoping for Fallout New Vegas, but it got released and it got some very interesting reviews online. it's been a long time since I've seen a game that has been reviewed quite across this spectrum of scores. Like there are those out there who said it's brilliant, it's amazing, like 10 out of 10. And then there are others who just thought the game had some incredibly fundamental flaws in it that just made it kind of a slog to play. And one of those people happens to be Uzek. And you are not hilariously an outlier here. There are lots of reviews out there of people who are saying that this game is not good, and I wanted it to be good. So let's talk a little bit about The Outer Worlds 2. So what was your experience with the first one? Did you play it?
Yes, I did. But I will be clear, this is not a romancing saga situation. Like, I like Obsidian games in general, so...
There are very few things that are romancing saga situation when it comes to me disliking things. But no, I know what you mean. We've talked about it, and you genuinely like the world of the first game. You thought it had a tremendous amount of promise to it.
Yes, I think it had a lot of potential.
But it just doesn't sound like they were able to pick that up, in your opinion.
So my first issue with this game is you don't really have choice. You have the illusion of choice. So for example, like I finished basically all the side content in the game. Almost none of your skills matter. For example, there's not a single important locked door in the entire game. So there's no point in picking like lock picking at all, which I chose, and it was a waste of 20 points.
I found it interesting. I've been playing this for the last week. My opinion of the game isn't quite as critical as yours. I'm enjoying it, but it is by no means, I would say, it's by no means a 10 out of 10. And I know exactly what you mean, because you can choose skills, and mostly these skills come up in conversation. So whenever you're talking to somebody, an option will appear that will give you a dialogue choice if you have a certain skill in place. So medical, for example, or engineering. And 9 times out of 10, I find that additional dialogue, which is kind of funny, doesn't do anything. It doesn't get you anything else. And they're not even really skill checks. They just kind of exist as an additional line of dialogue on a page. And usually the response to it is not particularly engaging. It's just kind of there.
Yeah, it just feels like there's no consequence to anything in the game, like anything you do. I noticed that like halfway through, where it really did not matter what I was doing.
Let's talk about some of the things that you did like about the game. And I think many of the things that you did like about the game are things that I like about the game too. One of which being the design. The art direction of this thing is still gorgeous right across the board. Beautiful world design and societal design as well. Like all of the different corporations have a very different style of clothing, of dress. And that is very well represented here in this new version.
Yes, you can feel the increased budget in the game, and that's kind of what I was hoping for. I was hoping for just Outer Worlds 1 with
more money.
Yeah, pretty much.
I like the art direction. I think is still stunning. It's still great. As you mentioned in the review here, you do genuinely enjoy the companions, and actually the companions are some of the folks that I have been enjoying the most in this game so far. This is early. There's going to be a few spoilers here, but nothing to the point where it's going to be ruining enjoyment or spoiling major plot points. Your first companion is a gentleman by the name of Niles, who is one of your fellow agents of the Earth Directorate, and he goes through hell. Boy, he goes through hell, and comes out the other side maybe a stronger person. I haven't gotten that far yet, but I find the character kind of interesting.
Yeah, I enjoyed most of the companion arcs. There were some that I really liked and some I just didn't care as much for, but I think those mostly worked in the game.
Yeah, I've only actually encountered 3 companions yet. Niles, Inez, and obviously Valerie, who is your little robot mech, who is fine. I'm to be honest, I'm leaving her on the ship. I just find she's a robot. She's not that interesting. In my opinion, maybe things change later in the game, because I've just finished the first planet, not the tutorial setup, like the very first planet. I just finished it, so I have not gotten that deep into the game. And you say that later in the game, even the design gets even darker and more oppressive and more interesting. So I'm actually really looking forward to that.
Yeah, in my opinion, the planets get better. I read the RP Gamer review, which was also critical, and
Yeah, like that was
he didn't even like the planets. So
yeah, like I said, the reviews for this one are right across the board, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of outliers out there. It's people are loving it, they're hating it, and it's a lot of people are still giving it like 80s or so.
it also depends on what you're kind of looking for with a game like this, because there were some people comparing it to like BioShock, right? Like the gunplay is better, but that wasn't an aspect I was looking for. So
I think the gunplay in this is fine. Some of the additional weapons are pretty fun. Like they're one of the big features of the Outer Worlds. One was science weapons, which were these wacky, interesting weapons that could do all these different things. Like you had a shrink ray, for example. And here there are quite a few of those science weapons. Again, one of the ones you mentioned in here is a sword.
Yes, I like that weapon more than I should have because it's objectively a terrible weapon. Like, there's no reason to use it ever. There's no use case, but it's just fun to use.
Something I do agree with you a bit here that you mentioned are the NPCs. Now, I've met a couple of NPCs who I think are interesting, but for the most part, I don't find any of them quite as interesting as in the original game. Specifically, in the original game, you land on the very first planet. It's a Spacer's Choice planet, and you are presented with two very, very different points of view, both of which have both of them have a point to them, and you actually do have to make a fairly significant moral decision about which one to choose. And you can make an argument on either side. I think my biggest problem with the first planet in this game is there is a very, very clear side that is the good guys. Even though they're flawed, they are the good guys, because the other side they're just monsters. Good people, like there's good people in that society, but they're monsters. Their ideology is just horrific. And it really does make it a little bit less engaging that you have to choose between these two sides when it's like, well, no, clearly one side is better than the other. I guess you could play the other side if you're a monster or you want to play as a villain, but basically you want to play as a fascist, which I suppose there are a lot of people who do want to do that nowadays.
So I was actually curious about this. So I tried some different options, like reloaded a save or made backups. And if you pick like the wrong side, you could get permanently locked out of the companion, for example. So the game clearly doesn't want you making certain options.
Yeah, that was something I did notice, is that in the first, Ina's the companion that you find on this planet, who I really like. It's an interesting character and like a good example of how these corporations treat human lives as disposable, as products, essentially. But she didn't have a counterpart on the other side. And because there was no counterpart on the other side, there was less of a reason to play the other side, I guess. There wasn't just as much content there.
Yeah, and my other issue with the NPCs in general is they only matter when there is a quest that involves them. Otherwise, they might as well not exist. And once you complete that quest, they are just gone forever in the game.
I know what you mean. And there are a few places where I feel like some reoccurring faces might have been kind of fun. I did find this game does have the same black sense of humor. There's a moment early on that I actually genuinely laughed at. You are trying to get this invention, which turned out to be double jump boots. And the guy you're trying to get them from somehow thinks that the double jump boots are going to let him fly. And he jumps from a very high height and then just goes splat. And I thought that was a nice little piece of black humor that reminded me a lot of the first game.
Yeah, there are definitely some like interesting moments throughout.
I agree with you. On the whole, there's just not a lot of engagement in the world thus far for me. And I'm guessing if you feel that way, it doesn't get tremendously better.
Yeah, there was nothing that really like caught my interest. Like for the most part, I think the first planet actually had a little bit more of that, although it's hit or miss. And then later on, like they kind of lean towards the environments, which I thought were great, but there wasn't much substance, in my opinion.
Yeah, this game is, for anyone who's out there thinking, oh boy, let me break it to you. The game is not New Vegas. It's just not. Like, there's no real question there, any more than the Outer Worlds 1 was New Vegas. There is no New Vegas. New Vegas is New Vegas. But it's a whole other thing. And I feel like some of what they introduced in this game didn't quite. Maybe I don't know if you disagree with me here. I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea of not being able to respec your character, because then it creates the idea that every choice has consequence. But it does bother me a little bit that sometimes you get locked into a character path and you get locked out of content because you just don't have the right build, and you can't even go back and like check it out. You'd have to start the game again. You'd have to literally restart the character, play the original the opening world again, and it's just, I don't know. I like being able to respec your character. I think there should be a cost to it. I don't think it should be free, but I like being able to respec your character.
So my perspective is that if they're going with this route, then they should still make the skills matter. So their solution to this is make it so none of your skills matter, basically. Like, it doesn't matter what you level, you're never going to get anything important. There's not a single important locked door. Like, hacking is not important. Basically, nothing is like actually matters other than maybe your combat stats. So, like, you can complete all the side content without really increasing like most of your skills at all. So I think that has the opposite issue where like it's just not much of an RPG.
Agree with you in some ways. I think that I think I'm coming down a little bit less hard on the RPG element than you, because I feel like I am role playing, just not as much as I wish that I could be. One of the things that does pop up in this game that was in the previous one that I really, really like, which is flaws. I think flaws are a cool idea. What this is when you're wandering around the world, your behavior can sometimes trigger a flaw. And what that is, every flaw will have an effect. It will give you some kind of a buff and some kind of a debuff. And you really have to decide whether or not the debuff is worth the buff. And some of these are very, very funny. Like, I think the one that really got me, I'm a sneaky rogue kind of thief character, and I'm roaming around the world, always crouching. And I got triggered a flaw, bad knees. And it offered me, I could have plus 50% crouch speed, but every time I crouch, it emitted a 10-meter radius sound that could alert hostiles, which I think is really, really funny. And some of these games, some of these flaws are very, very clever and funny and can actually change the way that you play the game. I think that's an interesting gameplay mechanic. I just wish that there was a slightly more reliable way to trigger them. Mm-hmm. Did you pick any of them?
I picked a few, but mainly only the ones that benefited me for the most part. Well, I will say that like I agree with you from a gameplay standpoint. I'm mostly talking about like the quest design, right? Because I think this leans too far, in my opinion, into the MMO quest design, which I'm sure Zach is aware of. Like, there's a big scene and then you collect 5 grapes right after, right? But the thing with some of those games is the story is strong enough where it can carry that in my opinion, like it's not the best design, but like a strong story could make up for that, and this game doesn't have that.
I haven't gotten that deep into the story yet, so I can't entirely comment on that. I have to admit, I'm interested thus far in the antagonist, who I suspect is, I might be wrong about this, but I think it's heading towards this character being a false antagonist, based on the circumstances that are surrounding her. But I found her interesting in a way, but I also can see the potential downfall depending on how they develop their story. And based on your review, it doesn't sound like they pull it off very well.
I will say, if I reviewed this just halfway through, my overall opinion would have been much higher.
Okay, so it just sounds like in many ways they didn't stick the landing.
Yeah, I think the game's, despite the overall, score and everything, it's close to being much better. It's like you're, putting together a puzzle, or like I said, like the Constellation, and it just doesn't, has some of the right pieces, but just doesn't fit, and there's that like frustration. That's where I'm at.
Okay, I would say that For me, the biggest frustration in the game is actually something you mentioned here, which is, bugs. Now, there is nothing here I found that is quite as egregious as, I hate to keep comparing it, New Vegas, which are genuinely like, oh, you can't play this. Yeah, we know.
Luckily, you can get around them nowadays. But yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah, I haven't found any bugs that are quite that egregious yet, but there are some that are just really, really irritating. You mentioned one in the review that there's an elevator interaction that says you lack authorization to enter, and then it just worked anyway.
Yes, and this was an extremely important elevator where you're supposed to complete like an entire series of quests before you get access. And I just got access. Like it was, they forgot to black it out. So like there's the red text, but you can still select it. So I basically just skipped like the entire quest chain.
So far, I've had two major bugs. One which is completely benign. It doesn't matter. It just made me laugh. And the other which was genuinely kind of annoying. The first being, for whatever reason, all grass would load 8 meters above the ground. So there were just like clouds of grass flying around, which kind of did give it an almost like Avatar-esque floating islands aesthetic. But I was like, oh, is that a choice? And I looked and I was like, oh, that's not a choice. That's just the grass is not loading on the ground. But that's the kind of thing that can be patched pretty quick, I would imagine. The other one was a bigger problem. And it wasn't really a problem in terms of I could continue. It just was irritating. Something happened, and I don't know what, but it reset every single dialogue flag that I had previously had. So every time I would talk to a character, it would be the first time I talked to that character. Like I went through the opening, the opening town and everything, and
it's like Groundhog Day then?
A little bit, yeah. Like I went into the opening town and I talked to like the two characters there, and like one's the sneaky path and one's the military combat path, and then I completed one of their paths, and then I came back to turn it in, and both those conversational flags had both reset. So it was like I had never had those conversations. It still let me turn in the quest, but it was like, that's weird. And like Miles, for example, his companion quest is in the first world. Maybe he has other ones, but his companion quest is in the first world. He said, hey, hold up. Can I talk to you for a sec? In that classic, like Fallout-esque way. And you talk to him about it. You figure out his problem. You say, all right, let's go. And I got his quest. And then a little bit later, he stopped me again and said, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I was like, what is it about now? Exact same dialogue. And I was like, that's weird. And then I decided to do his quest, and I like got to the store where the character his quest is about worked at. And just before I went in, he was like, hey, hold up for a sec. I need to tell you something. And I was like, I know exactly what you're going to say, Niles. It was just annoying. It was such a weird little thing that happened, that all of these flags got re-triggered. And I imagine that those things are going to be repaired over time. But for now, yeah, it's a little annoying.
Yeah, there's currently a bug that's been widely discussed where if you get rid of a companion, it never flags that they're gone. You just can't access them. So everyone's still going to talk as if they're there. They're going to assume that they're like the companion quest is progressing, and you can still get their companion quest. You just can't do it. Where like everyone except for the companion you got rid of basically still triggers that dialogue.
That's awkward. Basically, you're left with kind of a ghost.
Yeah, for the entire story.
Ugh, yeah, that's irritating. And that's something I have noticed. There was in the very first, first big dungeon of the game, I wanted to do a certain thing. I wanted to overthrow the commander of this place. And I had done everything correct. I know I had done everything correct. And for whatever reason, the flag did not get set that let me do the last piece of the quest. So I had to fight the boss, which is fine because I like fighting the bosses, but also I'm playing a talker. I'm role playing as a sneaky talking guy. So it was really irritating to me that I put all this effort into actually like being able to get to this point, and then I was tripped up in the last few minutes because the flag didn't get tripped.
Yeah, one of my notes when I was playing is that this game is not ready to release, but I don't know who decided that they needed it to release at this time.
I have an odd feeling it was probably their corporate masters.
Yeah, that was my thought as well.
Yeah, which is currently a bit of a controversy online, actually, that they've made a game that is this blatantly anti-consumerism and down to corporations and down to mergers and things like that. And they are owned by a certain company that, frankly, their company culture actually could be like in one of these games with very few exaggerations, and it would still actually work.
Yeah, I feel bad because I like Obsidian. I like their games. I would rate most of their games like pretty high. I think, I think they're like, even with this, they're close in a lot of ways, but I think there are just multiple issues.
Yeah. Oh well. I'm going to keep playing it because I'm still genuinely enjoying the game. I really am. I don't agree with people who are saying that it is a perfect game. I think that is I don't know. I have a big problem with the internet as a whole right now. I'm genuinely having some significant issues with the internet as it currently exists, as many people are. But as a game reviewer and someone who reads a lot about, games on the internet and plays a lot of games, the idea that Zach, I'll give you a perfect example. And it is about your review, but it is not about you. It is, I read a big mistake. I read the Facebook review thread for your review, and it turned into a ridiculous culture war argument where some folks were like, finally, an honest review. And other people would be like, you haven't played the game yet. And other people would be like, no, it's an honest review. It's such a woke game. And like, they didn't read your review. Your problems with this game is clearly not that it's quote unquote woke. It's you have some significant problems with the gameplay mechanics, the story, like this thing, and like all of these things. And it bugs me inside that everything needs to be perfect or it needs to be bad. And any opinions in the mid range are completely invalid. And that seems to be what the internet is right now. And to me, that's not really a place to create art. Like, not everything's going to appeal to everybody. Some people don't like things, and that's okay.
I was in the back of my mind, I was a little bit concerned that people would be using this for those reasons. Obviously, I have to give like my honest thoughts about any game I review, but
you absolutely do, and you do.
I did not mention any of those aspects once in the review.
No, because that's to
those
me,
people can't read
and don't.
Don't is maybe the bigger problem. Maybe it's bigger sin than can't.
Like, I even mentioned like at the end, like it almost could have been a lot better, right? I said like the constellation is like the stars just aren't aligning, right? Like the stars are there, they're just not making the constellation.
Yeah, I mean, it actually seems like, at least from what I'm hearing, like that it's a game that could be reclaimed still, and like everything you're talking about, like it's like the structure exists. It's just they did a bad job. It feels like the structure itself could function, but just none of the pieces are fitting together. Actually, it's quoting you. So yeah, but people don't like nuance.
No, they do not, and they certainly don't like nuance right now. Well, thank you, Zach, for playing through this. I wish that you had a better time playing it. I know you were looking forward to it. So sometimes that happens, though. You look forward to a game, you play it, and you're like, not really working for me. And that's a shame. But that's what playing games is.
I think it's the important part of reviewing in general, right? Like you 100%. Can't just play, not every game's going to just nail it every time. So,
well, it's also the desire of the internet. Unfortunately, this is just video game journalism as a whole, and it's one of my biggest criticisms. Click culture demands that something either be the best thing ever or the worst thing ever, because anything in between doesn't get clicks. Like it needs to be a take, and unfortunately, that means that a lot of the games in the middle are just kind of. It does not lead to. How can I put this? It does not lead to objectively good criticism, I don't think. Like your review is a negative review of the game, and it is a good negative review of the game. Like it actually goes through and it analyzes the game and it says, this doesn't work for this reason, this doesn't work for this reason. whereas it doesn't have anything to do with trying to get clicks or trying to inflame people or trying to start an argument in the comment section. Anyway, that's getting off on my entire thing about games media right now, but that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying it. I'm not loving it. I think it's a good game. I don't know how my opinion will progress as it goes on, but for the while, I'm still having a good time.
And yeah, and I hope for like anyone listening to this, I hope if you get this game, you have a better time than I did. Like I'm not going to, like trash the game or anything. So
yes, I'm not feeling the rage radiating off you right now that I'm like, how dare you enjoy it?
I mean, from my perspective, like I wasn't really interested in this game, but I really enjoyed reading your review, so I got something good out of it because your review was really compelling. So worked out for me.
All right, folks. I'm going to move on now to. It's a discussion question. I wasn't going to have a discussion question today because I thought, okay, this is going to take us to an hour. But then when Zach, you and I were talking and I said something, I was like, ooh, that'd be a good discussion question. So I don't think that there is such a thing as, this is not a criticism of what you said, by the way, Zach. I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect game. And actually that goes into what we just talked about in the sense that, opinions may vary. A perfect game would have to have like a perfect everyone loves it, and clearly that's not the case. But what I think is a good way to say it is a perfect version of itself, like a game that genuinely I don't think could be improved. Anything taken away or added to it would detract from it. And I think that Chrono Trigger is actually an excellent example of a game that is the perfect version of itself. Some may disagree, but that's what I think. And I was just curious, for both of you, what would you say are other games, like just pick one, that you think is the perfect version of itself? Something that if you took away from it or you added anything to it, it would actually detract from the whole.
I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, I think that I would agree with you about Chrono Trigger. I think that's a better way of putting it. I actually sometimes hold Chrono Trigger's like sort of like precise, almost perfect version of itself against it. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, this is such an excellent game, but like it doesn't reach far enough to actually miss. You know what I mean? Like it's so beautifully constructed and so beautifully put together. So I'm gonna pick a game that I think swings really big and that I don't think any changes would make it better. And that's Nier Automata. Like Nier Automata has things about it that I think people criticize, but my argument always, I always come back like, well, that's part of the point. That's part of the point. That's part of the point. And so like, lack of autosave, I'm like, well, that's thematically relevant. Invisible walls, like it's actually playing with the notion of video games. So like it's part of the point. And so I can't think of anything with that game, and I'm cheating because I'm picking like one of my, probably 3 favorite games of all time. But I think that if you mess with that game, it causes a lot of dominoes to fall, and the game is not what it is anymore. So I don't want them to touch it. That's my opinion.
I guess I'll pick a game that I reviewed this year, which is Clair Obscur.
I've heard such good. I still haven't played it, but I've heard such incredible things about it.
I think with games that are held in very high regard, obviously different people will have different opinions. But if you change the game to cater to someone who's like has any critiques, it's just going to cause other issues. So I agree with that.
I'm going to choose 2 because I'm the host and I can. And they're both actually going to be Nintendo games and like first party Nintendo games as well. And this first one, some people might disagree. I think that Link's Awakening is the perfect version of itself. And the way I know that is I reviewed the remake. And the remake is gorgeous. It's a beautiful, beautiful game. The claymation style, diorama style world is beautiful. But I didn't enjoy it as much as I loved the original. And I don't think that's just nostalgia talking. I think the original Link's Awakening is a better game. And I think that maybe with the exception of adding color in the Game Boy Color version, there wasn't really a good way to improve on that experience. It really did come out with exactly what they wanted this game to be. And expansion of it just didn't really help it be better, in my opinion. And have either of you played the either of you?
I haven't played the remake. And I don't think I ever beat the original because it was just like a little beyond my skills. But I need to because I hear excellent things about it from you. All the Twin Peaks references. I'm like, I gotta play this thing, man. I gotta do it. And I will at some point. I just haven't. But I was thinking I would play the remake, but maybe I will just fire up the GBC version.
The remake is really good. Do not get me wrong. I gave it a very good review, but I think at the time I didn't even consider whether or not it was going to be better or worse. I think it was because it was early pandemic as well, and I was just was not possibly capable of knowing what was going on around me at the time. Yeah. But in retrospect, I played some of the original again, and I was like, I think this is better. It's not like the remake is bad. It's just there's something about it that is the best version of itself, in my opinion. What did I give it? Oh no, it wasn't early pandemic. It was 2019, so it was just before. What did I give it? What did I give it? Because I don't remember. I gave it a 91. So clearly I enjoyed it. The other one is, and I don't know if either of you have played it, and this is a funny one because people genuinely consider its direct sequel to be a better game. I don't think it is. I think Mario Galaxy. I think Mario Galaxy is the best Mario game that has ever been made, and every game afterwards, including Odyssey, which I love, is just not as good as it.
Would you include the Wiimote stuff with that?
I would, believe it or not. I actually enjoyed picking up the little stars with the Wiimote.
Yeah, it's like, something to do while you're running around too, it never, like, people complained about it, but like it never bothered me. I prefer Galaxy 2, but I understand your point.
Yeah, Galaxy 2 did a few things, I guess, better, but like as a standalone, I think the Galaxy is just the best Mario game. And I genuinely, I feel like Galaxy is to 3D Mario what Super Mario Brothers 3 is to 2D Mario, which is they can still create great games that are better in certain ways, but it is Mario 3 is the perfect version of itself. And you know that for a fact because they've remade it on the Super Nintendo, and it's not as good as the NES version, in my opinion. But that's just where I'm coming from. I like this idea. When I said it, I thought the perfect version of itself. I really, really like that rather than the perfect game, because there's no such thing as a perfect game, because there's no such thing as a game that has universal appeal to everybody. But something can be the perfect version of itself. I like that. I'm just feeling, I don't know, whimsical today, I guess. Anyway, okay. Well, you want to know what else is the perfect version of itself? Our store. Mike is going to have a problem with me saying that.
Excellent. It's not even true, but it's excellent.
Well, no. We can always do better, and we do. For example, we now have shorts in the store. So shorts is bringing the store to the perfect version of itself. We are on our way. And we also have the RPG Fan Review Card Collection, which is a showcase of 300 of our review cards, as you can see on Instagram and other social medias. There are quite a few games in there that I would argue are the perfect versions of themselves, and maybe even some reviews that are the perfect versions of themselves. So check that out. Another thing you can do is check out our past episodes of Random Encounter. Last week, we were chatting about Pokemon Legends. You know what? I'm in such a Blue Jay mood. ZA and Absalom, which is a roguelike brawler. Really, really cool sounding game. And then over at Retro Encounter, I believe you folks just finished off the second part of your Star Ocean, the second story series.
Yeah. Ben did a phenomenal job of hosting a game journal, 2 episodes on Star Ocean 2. They all played the remake. Listening to it, I was like, man, I wish I had been on these episodes. It sounds so fun. And after what's coming up, I think, so this goes up on Monday. So then on Thursday, we're going to have a deep dive into Final Fantasy Tactics, which I couldn't help myself on. So
I don't think you should have helped yourself on. I think that is a course that everyone is going to enjoy.
I hope so.
Yeah. And we also have Rhythm Encounter. There was no episode last week, but 2 weeks ago, we had an episode that focused on the best music of the third quarter of 2025, which is a horrifying concept, but it's true nevertheless. So check that out if you want to hear some of the best music of the year. And I suspect you'll be hearing more about that in our best music of the year that will be coming out in just a few months. Holy crap. If you'd like to get in contact with us here, you can fire us off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. Love to hear from you if you have any suggestions for future discussion questions like the one I just came up with off the top of my head. I would prefer to have a list of them where I can just be like, ooh, I like this one. I'm doing this one this week. That would be awesome. So if you have any ideas, fire them off to me. And if you'd like to send me an email personally, you can do so at my email, jlogan@rpgfan.com. And you can also find me at johnologan.bluesky.social. I'm not the only person on here with a social media presence. Zach, where can we find you?
I mean, I have one, but you shouldn't follow me because I'm a teacher. But if you want to get in touch with me, probably the best way is email zachw@rpgfan.com. I'm also on our Discord as Zach W.
Cool. And Zach?
You can read my reviews on the site.
Awesome.
RPG Fan.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends to help us get the word out there. And you can also rate us on iTunes or your other podcast player of choice. Zach and Zach, thank you very much for joining me today. And I mean, these were not small games. There's a massive amount of time investment because, as you know, as everyone listening knows, we play the game. We play the whole game. The game is beaten. So we are not giving partial opinions. If Zach, perfect example. If you had only played half the game, it probably would be a much more positive review. You didn't. You played the whole thing, and thus that informed your review.
Zach probably beat it like a day and a half too because he's a machine. So
I do not understand how you play games so fast. You are by far the best. You are by far the best video game player on the site.
I went back through and I played through it again just to make sure.
Holy cripes!
Yep, I have played games with Zach. I can attest to his skills.
Yeah, that is insanely impressive. Holy crap. Regardless of how long it took you to play the game, thank you very much for playing through them both. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your time and I appreciate your reviews.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely anytime. And everyone out there, thank you very much for joining us. And whatever you are playing, have fun.